Hey guys, welcome back to another season of On the Road to Discovery with myself. Welcome to season 2. So in this season, I am entering with a fresh perspective. I think I went into season 1 thinking a lot about the results, the outcome, the likes, the views, the subscribers. But in this season, my focus is obedience. God has given me an assignment and I plan to complete it to the best of my ability. And I'm so excited to see how season 2 turns out. But today, I am not alone. I get to kickstart the season with Miss Sibz. She is a mom, an executive assistant for over 10 years, a workaholic, and Uthando Nestembu editor. Welcome and thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, so just to warm up, before we get into it, can you please share 2 interesting facts about yourself? Actually, I'm gonna help you with one. I just realized that I don't know your full name. I only know you as Sibz. And now I'm really curious to know your full name.
Okay, so I've actually got a lengthy one. My full name is Sibongile Gobisa Noma Komazi Dlamini.
Oh, so the Sibz is from...
The Sibz is just from Sibongile. I grew up not liking my name. It was a name that I was given by my grandmother, and I had to grow into liking it. It's centered around appreciation, and I think with age, I've been able to find appreciation and see appreciation around things in my life.
Oh, that was very beautiful. Very interesting. So you have one more to share?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah.
The other thing a lot of people don't know about me is that I am one of, I think, 13 or 14 children from my dad's side. I'm a first daughter after 4 boys. So I carry a very special place in my family. And the funny thing about our family is that I don't know whether it's funny or interesting, but all of us are firstborns. All 14, 13 of us are firstborns. I still don't know the full tally of my how many kids my dad has, but it's around that number.
Sure. Very interesting facts indeed. But anyway, I think God has a way of planting people in your path. So guys, I got to connect with Sibz because I was broken and I was brave enough to share my story in a live comment section. And Sibz was obedient enough to DM a stranger, which is me. And she was like, girl, I know what you're going through. I've been there. This is what's going to happen. And this is how we should do it. And guys, she literally didn't leave me alone till I was like, okay, I think I'm healed. I think I've conquered. And she just kept on checking on me. So thank you for that. Truly appreciate it.
It was only a pleasure.
Yes. I feel like this is like a full circle moment because around this time last year, you were guiding me on how to move on, to get over my breakup. And today we're sitting here together, guiding others on how to heal, move on, and rebuild themselves. But before we get into it, right, can we talk about how difficult it is to let go, to leave that toxic relationship, whether it's a relationship that no longer serves you or, what do you mean you are aware that this relationship doesn't serve you anymore? What do you mean you can see that this relationship is toxic, but you still choose to stay? I was thinking about it and I was like, there has to be a psychological reasoning behind this. And I even did some research. There's like a few points that we could discuss.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are the points. Okay, the first one is sunk cost fallacy. Basically, the person would be like, I've put in 5 years, I can't leave now, or it was all a waste. So I feel like staying longer, you're literally adding more years to the loss. You're wasting more time. You are delaying entering into the new chapter. You're delaying the person that God has for you. What do you think about that?
I think it's very true. Look, I've been in this situation before, right? I went through a pretty hectic breakup, I think 2-3 years ago. The fact that I can't even remember how far long it has been, it shows me that I've actually healed past it. What was evident in my breakup was that I got so used to the person being in my life that they sort of became a fixture in my life. And to break from that, it was so difficult that I slipped into a depression, right? Because they were a permanent fixture, like sort of having a family member. And I think the hardest thing that I had to do was to stop loving that person and to admit to myself that this was a failed relationship. I had to mourn the potential and hopes for the relationship that I had. That was the most difficult thing about it. I remember it was so bad, Amanda, that I had to sort of convince myself that this is the reality that I'm living now without this person. And what they did was to sort of move swiftly on from the relationship while I was battling back and forth this reality of breaking up. And I think for a lot of people, that's the difficult part about breaking up from someone that you've been with for a long time. It's sort of sitting in that feeling to say, do I continue for the sake of continuing, or do I start a new reality? And for me, I had to start a new reality of being on my own. And I had to accept that this relationship was no longer in existence.
Sure. Yeah. And then the second point says lack of self-worth. So if you don't know your value, you accept what confirms your fears. And I can resonate with this because I didn't know my value. I didn't have self-respect. I sort of settled for what I was getting. You know, do you think you can resonate with those points?
Definitely. And when you have a low level of self-worth, you become stuck in a rut, right? Up until you get out of that toxic cycle. And looking back on my relationship, look, I'm going to be honest. When I reflect now, that was a poor choice of a relationship. My standards at the time was so low. And I think to myself, Swangile, what the hell were you thinking choosing this person? And it felt like when I was with him in a relationship, it felt like I had to abandon myself to allow him into my life. And every single day, the choices that I had to make were of abandonment so that I could choose him and be with him. So once we finally broke up, I mean, and I'm also not afraid to say that he's the one that actually broke up with me. As tough as it was. Yeah. And that's why I could resonate with you. Because actually when we met on a live, right? And you were pouring your heart out. And it's the choice of words that you shared that resonated with me. And I saw myself in those words. You said, I'm so broken. I don't know how to go on. And I thought to myself, this is exactly me. Because my self-esteem at the time, it was broken. It was non-existent. Therefore, when you're at that level, imagine the kind of people that you choose. You only attract broken people.
Exactly.
People with a low self-worth and who can take you nowhere in your life. But the actual hard work is to rebuild yourself, you know. It's to actually admit to yourself that you weren't in a position to make great decisions. So what happens when you're in a place that you aren't able to make great decisions? You choose people that are broken. You choose people that feed off other people, because my partner at the time, he left me in such a broken space that I wasn't able to get out of bed. He was a bloodsucker. He was a soul snatcher. And he's out there now living his life. And do I blame myself for it? No. I had to make a choice and admit and call it out to say, Sibongile, at that time you had such a low self-worth that you actually regressed in your love life than moving forward.
You are what you attract. Yeah, for sure. So the last point is the fear of the unknown. You know, thinking to yourself that, is the grass green on the other side? Is there better? Is this the best I can get? You know, will anyone else ever love me? You know, So I think, I don't know if I been in that place. I don't know if I can relate to this point, but maybe subconsciously I've thought it. I don't know. But can you resonate with it?
Definitely much. You know, having been left, right? Because for me to have the relationship end, it actually wasn't my choice. I was left. And I was left after continuous cheating. Forgiveness, I forgave, I stayed, right? So I was in the place where I still wanted to stay and still get damaged and broken. And imagine where I'd be now today. So it was actually a blessing that he left.
Yeah, definitely.
But as the end of the relationship was unfolding, I wanted to stay so badly that I couldn't see a greener pasture. I couldn't see it. My friends were telling me, they were saying to me, Sibongile, you have so much potential. There are better guys out there. Go out, you'll meet someone. And because of my age and because of the fact that I'm a single mom, I think I ranked myself lower than other women. And I had to push myself, pray myself out of that rut and convince myself and look at all my achievements and things that aren't tangible that I've achieved for myself and say to myself, but is this the best that I can do? And where I noticed that things were definitely amiss, it's because there was so much struggle in the relationship. It was so bad, Amanda, that, the guy wouldn't even walk me to the shops. I had to beg him for him to walk me. Something that's, easy for other people to do. But I had to beg him to do the little stuff. And that's when I realized, hey, man, I've hit rock bottom. Yeah. And honestly, I had to do internal work. I had no one else to look at and hold accountable but myself. So I started doing these 3 things. I started praying. I started reading books that would uplift my self-worth. And I started speaking life into myself.
Oh, very important.
I had to get to a point where I had to push myself out of bed. I got tired of, people looking down on me. Because for me, when I looked at this, yes, this was the worst breakup of my life. But it wasn't a bad life. I can bounce off from this. And I remember saying to you in one of the voice notes that I shared with you, I said to you, give yourself 12 months. And that's exactly what I gave myself.
12 months later.
12 months later, you've got a different story to tell. And looking at myself now, looking at the things that I know now and what I've learned from that relationship, I can definitely tell you I'm not going to make the same mistake.
Yeah,
I've got a very different view now on what relationships are meant to be for me. And I am content with where I am in my life. I'm no longer looking to be with people that, pull me back in some sort of way. And I'm able to acknowledge to myself, if it doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for me. There's no need for me to force myself. And when the time is right, God will make it happen for me.
Absolutely.
He will bring someone into my life that will sort of be on par with me, my values, my upbringing, my beliefs, and where I'm going in my life. And when I look back on my relationship, the point of divergence, it was the upbringing. Because it was so chaos. My breakup, my relationship in its entirety, it was so chaotic and there was so much manipulation that I was even questioning whether it was really daytime or nighttime out there. Sure. Because I was left to live in a bubble, but this person was going out telling other people things about me that weren't true, because that's how he was attracting new women and because that's how it works. And I had to be okay with it. And I remember in our previous conversations on WhatsApp when I was telling you, the first point of being okay, it's to accept what has happened to you. It's to acknowledge your part in it. And I had to be honest with myself to say, at some point, I allowed it to happen because I stayed. I still wanted to be in that relationship. And God knows what would have happened if that guy didn't leave me.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So I need your expertise here. So there is probably a woman out there struggling to come to terms with the fact that the relationship has run its course. There's probably someone out there struggling to leave a toxic relationship, or someone has left, but the heartbreak is too heavy to bear. So can you please speak to those people and just share some of what you shared with me when I was going through it? And there's also this process that you shared with me. I don't remember, something about pulling yourself back to yourself eventually. I hope you remember. Yeah. But yeah, please speak to these people.
What worked for me, and I'm not sure what works for other people, right? What worked for me at the time, one, I've shared with you, it's to accept your reality in terms of what has happened. Two, it's to call it out by name, right? To say that I was betrayed. And I think that was the hardest thing that I had to come to terms with. And it hurts because it was a betrayal, right? And the other thing was I had to pull myself towards myself. I had to be a friend to myself and stop seeking out external validation and admit to myself how I got to this point. Because for me, things quickly, turned upside down. It was a good relationship for about two and a half years. We moved in together. I then saw the realist picture now that in actual fact, this wasn't the person I've been dating for the past 2.5 years. But in that short space of time, I had to sort of accept the person that was now breaking up with me. And the other thing that was hard for me to do, that I needed to do to sort of get out of that rut, was to be honest with myself. That I was in the wrong space, and sort of read the room and read the pattern of the relationship, that for the past 2-3 years, things actually didn't feel right. And when they don't feel right, they actually aren't right. We would disagree on the most simplest things. And I understand that we are different in our approach to situations. But for me, it's questioning myself to say, is this really the person that I want to be with in the long run of things? And the honesty in that, it was no. I enjoyed having a partner, but I didn't enjoy being with him. And that was the honesty of it.
Wow, that is very profound. So I want to share some of what I learned. So during this time, there was this sermon by Sarah Jakes Robert that I bumped into kind of on YouTube. It's titled Boundaries and Becoming. So firstly, on healing, she says that healing isn't always graceful. It looks like breaking down over something small because it uncovers something big. Let the tears come. That's your body making space for peace. And then she also touches on boundaries, and she says that love without boundaries can cause so much heartbreak and trauma because you allow yourself to be in a relationship with someone that speaks negatively towards you. And then she then points out what having boundaries looks like. She says having boundaries is saying I am willing to give up my seat at the table because it is more important to preserve myself than it is to sit here and see what's going to happen for me here. Is he going to change for me? Is he going to become a better person? It's just way more important to preserve myself. And I thought wow, I think everyone that's going through this phase needs to hear that. So yeah, now that we've touched on the healing part, I wanted us to get into the moving on and rebuilding ourselves part. So just answering these two questions, I have two questions for us to answer. The first one is, how do you move on when your heart still remembers? I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, I think for me, moving on while your heart still remembers, I think the most important thing, Amanda, is for you to express what you're feeling right now. And that's what helped me. If I needed to cry at that particular time, I would cry. I remember sitting on a flight to Cape Town, and it was for work. And throughout this whole breakup, I still needed to sort of keep up with my life and do what I needed to do as a mom.
Life needs to go on.
You know, as an EA, life must go on. The show must go on.
Exactly.
I remember sitting on a flight to Cape Town and I was carrying this heavy shame that I was going through a breakup. And it ended because of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And I remember sitting silently and crying in that flight. So much that the gentleman turned around next to me and asked, "Are you okay?" And I was like, inside, I'm not okay. I'm not okay with what happened to me. I'm not okay with what was said. But in that moment, I needed to express my feelings. Because how do you get over something if you don't own that feeling? And that's the question that I had to myself.
First step is acceptance.
Acceptance, owning that feeling and expressing that feeling. The days got easier because I would set time with myself to go through the motions, to go through everything that I was feeling about the breakup. And a separation is not easy. As I said, you become accustomed to the person, how they are. They become part of your thought process. You know, I would be shopping for grocery and wanting to call him, "Do you feel like having this today?" And I would remember that he's not a part of my life anymore. It is owning that journey and being able to hold another person's hand through that journey. And for me, I needed to also acknowledge that, you know, this is only part of my journey. It's not my entire life.
Yeah.
There are many other great guys out there. I've dated greater people. I'm a great lover and I'm going to meet better people.
Someone that matches.
But I think it's very important whilst you're on that journey to sort of not sidestep it and pay attention to it. Because when I started being honest with myself to say, look, I'm going through a breakup, I'm not in the greatest space. And it took me having those conversations with my boss, with my daughter, because remember, this person, I also had a boundary in my life and I forgo that boundary and brought him into my home. And people knew that I was in this relationship. I mean, we were posting on Instagram. We were very active on social media. So I needed to have the necessary conversations with people to say, hey, I'm going through this. And the other thing that I did was to sort of let them know how they can best support me. And for me, healing is talking is healing. I had to talk it out. Sometimes speak to myself to say, hey, I'm not in the greatest of spaces. And then I would wake up the next day and, hey, I'm in a much better mood than I was yesterday.
That is so true.
And it starts little by little. And there's actually a great saying that was coined, I think, through the development of social media to say, pour into your cup. And I sat and I asked myself, what does this mean to me? How do I, as Swongile, as a mom, pour into myself? So I started doing things that feed my soul, that make me happy. And I started, you know, identifying patterns within people, within workspaces that don't necessarily work for me. Because as much as I was going through this breakup, I still needed to work. I still needed to be a mom. And I still needed to show up each and every day.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I would say remembering is not failure. You're not jeopardizing your healing process. It means you loved. It means you are human. You know, you can remember and still choose a new direction. I remember in my healing journey, I would also have flashbacks. I would remember and I would get so frustrated with myself because I'm like, oh my gosh, I am backtracking. I'm jeopardizing my healing journey. But the truth is, it's not wrong, you know?
It's not.
Healing is not linear. It is not a straightforward path. It has its ups and downs. It has good days and bad days. And on both days, you are healing.
Yeah. And every day you're healing. Every step is healing. I can look back now in my relationship and the breakup and the drama that came with the breakup, and it doesn't hurt. But there was a point in my life where I couldn't reflect. because it was hurting so much. But it's those days where you realize that in actual fact, this is the trauma that happened to me. And all I can do now is move past it and move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think talking helps.
It does.
It helps a lot. There's this meme on Twitter that I saw that says, a heartbreak, it's under attention, because you just want to tell everyone about it. Everyone who's willing to.
Girl, I remember I went onto a live on TikTok. I stole the show. I could not stop talking about this
You want to tell
breakup.
everyone.
And the painful thing about it was that I was still in that phase where I was still going back to the person. I wanted to break free, but I was still going back to the person. And I went onto this live. I remember it was Z's live. And I said, Z, I think this man has done something to me. I cannot break from him. But look at God. You know, he showed me a very ugly side, and which was the realest form of my relationship. And he said to me, get out of here. You deserve better.
And one thing about God, if you don't listen, he will keep showing you that you are not supposed to be here.
And I was forced out.
Worse things will happen. It'll get worse and worse until you leave.
Yeah.
So the second question is, how do you rebuild yourself?
You know, this is a very important question. And I feel like in my heartbreak story, right, it was the hardest part. Because after 3 years of being with the same person and being in this relationship, who am I? I know I'm an EA. But beyond that, who am I? I'm still a daughter to my mom. I'm still a daughter to my father. I'm a sister to my siblings. So for me, the first step was pouring into myself, yes, but also looking at the community, the people around me that matter most. What is it that they see in me? And one thing I can bravely say, open with my chest, that my circle was so supportive of me. They wanted me to win in all aspects. And not necessarily win by having a man next to me, but to look back at my life and be happy. And I think that's the first point of rebuilding. It's to have direction.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I needed to have that. I needed to sit, map out where I was going with my life, what I wanted for Usbongile and what makes Bongile happy.
Absolutely. For me, I would say rebuilding yourself is when you stop asking, why did this happen? And you start asking, God, what do you want me to build with these pieces? And for me, what I built with the pieces is On the Road to Discovery. This platform right here is what I built with the pieces. It's what God instructed me to build with the pieces. So I was going through Twitter and I saw a statement that I felt like will resonate with the conversation we were having today. I wrote it down. So I am quoting.
Okay.
It says, unfortunately, your ability to move on is dependent on how high your self-esteem and self-respect is. So I want us to share our 2 cents on it. Do we agree or do we disagree?
I definitely agree 100%. And I feel like, in all honesty, Amanda, the rebuilding is the self-respect, building your self-respect and also your self-esteem as well. And often than not, that is the hardest part of the breakup, when you have to realize that this is the actual rebuilding that you have to do.
Yeah, I would also have to agree, because I have lived with both versions of myself. The version that lacked self-respect, didn't know her value, people pleasing, and the new version of myself now that has self-respect. I know my worth, I know my value, I have boundaries, and I can say that it is so much easier for me to walk away from situations that don't align with who I am now, situations that don't match my values. If someone is crossing my boundaries, I will not hesitate, you know. So yeah, I definitely agree 100%. So while we're on the topic of moving on and rebuilding ourselves, you recently shared that you had to walk away from your job. And I feel like that is also heartbreak, you know, with your job, with a plan, with your identity. I don't know if this is the job you've been in for 10 years plus, but if yes, that's definitely breaking up with identity as well. So I wanted to ask, how are you moving on and rebuilding yourself from that? Like, is it the same as the relationship heartbreak or is it different?
I think for me, corporate heartbreak is on the same level as a personal heartbreak, because corporate heartbreak, it happens in the presence of people that you work with, right? And what happened to me is I'm an executive assistant to executive management, and sometimes the relationship works out and sometimes it doesn't. And unfortunately, with my previous employer, it didn't work out, right? But it was a mutual separation in the truest sense of the word. What had happened is I had only been with the company for about 6 months. But 2 months into the role, I then started asking myself very important question. And I knew part of my value and my own personal values was I like being led as an EA. I don't want to have to give direction, right? Because I'm the right-hand right-hand woman to an executive manager. But the relationship, it was so poor and there were narcissistic traits that were playing out every day that I also needed to acknowledge that the relationship is no longer working. And another stumbling block was that I knew it every day. I saw it, that this isn't the space that I wanted to be in. I mean, it played with my mental health. And to a point, I became disengaged in the role because I didn't want to be in it anymore. So finally, when I was approached by management, and I'm someone, Amanda, that gives off my very best at work. I love my job. I love being an EA. It's what I know. It's what I've always done ever since I came out of school. And it's something that, it's a role that I carry with pride. But in that role and within that company, it was so bad that we couldn't have open conversations. And I knew that wasn't the space that I wanted to be in. And for the first time in my life, I then went through a mutual separation. And it was hard, right? It was hard.
I can imagine.
You start getting the looks from your colleagues. There are questions, and we are energetic beings, right? We can tell when two people don't get along. And for me, it wasn't just two people, it was a couple of people. I then started questioning myself. But what I wasn't going to accept, and what I told myself that I wasn't going to accept, is that I'm bad at my job. And looking at my CV, I then realized I have such a strong work history. Why am I going to allow one employer to sort of change my narrative, to change my work ethic? And I also had to seek leadership coaching to sort of go through the emotions. And it came to a point where I started carrying work home and the emotions of work home. And it wasn't fair for myself. It wasn't fair for my daughter. And I came to a realization that same as a personal relationship breakup, that this isn't working. And it came to a point where we agreed that the relationship is working and is not working. And I really thought it would be a respectful, amicable breakup. But sometimes, narcissists don't like being left. And that's something that we just need to accept and understand. My previous boss was a narcissist. He would say things to make me feel like I am being attacked, I'm being in a corner. And finally, it came to my last day and we decided to part ways. But my anxiety and my sort of depression came first day of being unemployed. Then I started spiraling. Because with the roles that I've held in companies, I play quite a critical role that my phone is always ringing. People are always texting me. And for the first day, it was utter silence. And I couldn't stand it. I then now had to be a mom full time. And I wasn't used to it. I think my system went into shock. And after 3 days in bed, my mom kept calling me every day to say, hey, you're going to find another role. You're going to be okay, right? And the hard part of that journey, look, I was only unemployed for 3 weeks. There are people that have been through this for years, but in that 3 weeks, I went through all the emotions.
This is the reality that holds people back from walking away, from leaving.
True. And I realized the hardest part about employment is being called to an interview and having to show up when you're still feeling those feelings. And I had to be hard on myself to put them aside and say, look, I need this job. I'm going to show up the best way I can. And for me, that was the rebuilding that you speak of. The rebuilding of the self-respect. And to understand that, hey, in actual fact, in that previous job, I actually dropped the ball there on my own respect for myself because this wasn't a role that I should have applied for. So for me, fortunately, God came through and blessed me with another role. And I'm still in that phase because once you go through a trauma and a very traumatic separation, you must understand that things don't just balance out immediately just because you found a job. There's a certain unworking of a traumatic effect that needs to be done. I'm still in a leadership coaching. I still need to speak to myself to say, you deserve to be here. You deserve to be employed. Because I was left in such a broken space that I was made to feel that I'm unemployable. But when I look at my CV, I'm like, no, man, but this can't be true. I was being fed lies to not believe in myself. And the rebuilding came in belief of myself, belief of my skill set, and also showcasing my capabilities in relationships, not in relationships, in interviews.
No, that's wow. Shout out to you for getting a job in 3 weeks.
Thank you.
God is good.
Thank
God
you.
is
In this
good.
tough economy, trust me, as I see it as a blessing each and every day.
Truly. So we have come to the end of the episode. But before we end the episode, I just want to say a little prayer for the listeners. So, dear God, Heavenly Father, for the girls, the men, the women and the men that are listening with heavy hearts, they know that relationship is not good for them, but leaving feels like dying. I pray for the ones that have left, but the heartbreak is too heavy to bear. I pray for the people that are dealing with different types of breakups, different types of heartbreaks, losing their jobs, having to walk away from their jobs, having to walk away from what's familiar. Dear God, I pray that you give them courage today. I pray that you remind them that you have called them. You did not call them to survive love, but you have called them to be loved and to be safe. Lord, I pray that you build them new with the pieces. I pray that you do a new thing in them. Put a Sibz in their life, God, someone who will see them, someone who will say, me too, and here's how you get out. I pray this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode and I'll be seeing you in the next one.